What is up, YouTube? Dottz Gaming here, and welcome to my ESO Best Beginner Gear Set Guide for Endgame. Basically, what this guide is going to do for you guys is tell you the best gear, starting gear sets to use on every class and every role in the Elder Scrolls Online. Granted, these will not be best in slot gear sets. A lot of that involves needing to do trials, but I wanted to tailor this guide towards the average player. What gear should they be aiming for to participate at endgame? The way I structured this guide is I have a set of very, very easy to acquire gear that will really only require 2 crafted sets and then a purchased set of jewelry from a guild trader, and then a set to look forward to, a set to upgrade to, which will then require overland sets and monster sets, so you have something to strive for. Now, a lot of these setups, the overland / monster set with combination with some crafted sets, are very close to best in slot. They may not be best in slot, but they're still competitive enough, and you will still be able to do the majority of the content in the game. I'm going to break this down class by class by class, so I'm going to go over all the Nightblade stuff, all the Sorc stuff, all the Templar stuff, the DK stuff, the Warden stuff, but before I show you the timestamps and you guys go clicking away, I have to give a huge shout out to It's Just In Case for helping me put this guide together. Without him, I would not have been able to complete this guide as fast as I would have been able to. He really helped me out on the research. He came up with the list, and then me and him talked in Discord. He went over the list he came up with, and I just gave my thoughts, and me and him maybe changed like something here or there, or I added in my input in some places, but a lot of this information came from him, and I have to thank him so much for his help. Now, before I go any further, I know there's going to be people in the comments that go, why didn't you do this set? Why didn't you do that set? Why didn't you do this set? This is just the setups that Justin and I came up with, that this is what we thought that people should aim for and should strive for, and we think that it will perform pretty well. If you have your own personal opinions, you can go run that stuff. But this, excuse me, this is for people who are not sure what they want to run, or for someone who goes, you know what other setups can I try? What other setups am I possibly not thinking of, and what can I run? So that is what this guide is for, but now enough of me blabbering. Here are the timestamps for the different sections, so you could go and select your class, and then I would recommend watching the full setup for your class so that you know, no matter what role you're playing, what gear you should be running. Now, moving right into it though, we are going to start off with the class that I play, the Nightblade, and starting off with Magicka DPS. We are going to be running 5 pieces of Julianos, 3 pieces of Seducer, and 3 pieces of Willpower. This gives you an extremely rounded set of stats. Julianos giving you max Magicka, spell crit, and spell damage. Seducer giving you a line of recovery and more Magicka, and then Willpower giving you a massive boost to your Magicka and more spell damage. It's a very well-rounded set, and actually going to be what I recommend for every starting Magicka DPS in this guide. But if once you have this gear set and are looking to move on to something a little bit greater and a little bit better, you have some options. You could still run 5-piece Julianos if you would like, or if you want to mix things up and try something different, you can run Twiceborn Star, which gives you a line of health, Magicka, and stamina, and then allows you to have 2 Mundus boons at the same time. Pre-Horns of the Reach, the best Mundus stones to run with this are Shadow and Thief. Post-Horns of the Reach, I'm not sure, because I'm recording this while the PTS is still out, and I'm not sure if anyone has tested this yet. If it is post Horns of the Reach and you are watching this video, just, Google Twiceborn Star, Horns of the Reach, and I'm sure you will find a thread somewhere on a forum that will tell you what you should be running. Then, for your monster sets, you have either Grothdar or Valkynscoria. Grothdar is going to be easier to acquire. Valkynscoria does require you to do City of Ash 2, which could be a bit of a pain in the ass, but both sets are perfectly viable. It's just going to kind of depend on what type of playstyle you want to have. If you want to have a more ranged playstyle, you play Valkynscoria, because Scoria is going to give you a line of health and then summon a meteor on a dot, 8% chance, that will deal flame damage to the target and summon damage around it. Now that is at a range. If you want to play a more upfront, up close and personal playstyle, Grothdar would be a good option, because it just creates a pool of lava around you that deals flame damage to all enemies within 8 meters of you every second for 5 seconds, and that can occur once every 10 seconds. So that will give you a more kind of in your enemy's face kind of a playstyle. And then you can either run 3 pieces of Willpower and any random staff, or you'll have a dead piece of gear somewhere in your build. Just with the way the numbers work out, you have a leftover piece of gear. and if that really annoys you and you're like, I must have complete sets, then you could run 4-piece Mother Sorrow, which gives you a line of Magicka, and then in this case will give you 2 lines of Spell Critical, because you will be running 4 pieces of Mother Sorrow, being that, you know, willpower is just it's only a 3-piece set bonus, so you'll be able to run 4 pieces of Mother Sorrow. Moving into Stamina DPS, we have a very similar setup to the Magicka DPS. This is just obviously the Stamina counterpart. We have Hunting's Rage. You're going to be running 5 pieces of that, which will give you two lines of Weapon Critical, a line of Stamina, and will increase your weapon damage done. And then you're going to be running 4-piece Night Mother's Gaze, which gives you 2 lines of Weapon Critical and a line of weapon damage. And then you're going to be running 3 pieces of Agility, which will give you a lot of max stamina and weapon damage. Now you're probably wondering at this point, if you watch the Magicka section, Dottz Gaming, why was I only running 3 pieces of Seducers, but I can run 4 pieces of Night Mother's Gaze? That is because generally Magicka DPS in dungeons are going to be running stabs. They're going to be running double stabs. For your Stamina DPS, you guys will most likely be running Dual Wield and Bow, and running Dual Wield gives you an extra piece of gear on your front bar, which will allow you to get 4 pieces of Night Mother's Gaze on your front bar. So that is why you will have 4 pieces of that gear. I just wanted to clear that up before I went any further. Now, moving into the big boy sets, you're going to want to be running 5-piece Spriggans. That'll give you 2 lines of max stamina, a line of weapon damage, and a line of physical penetration, which is very important for stamina DPS. You guys do not get any pen from your passive, so you need to acquire it through your gear. So Spriggans is an amazing set to accomplish that goal. You'll also be running 5 pieces of Night Mother's Gaze, so you will now get the 5-piece bonus from this, which is critical attacks also reduce the target's physical resistance by 2580 for 6 seconds, just giving you more pen. And then to even up that more, we have Crag, which will give you more penetration, and then it has a 10% chance to spawn Drug Limbs that create shockwaves in front of you, dealing physical damage every 0.4 seconds for 1.2 seconds. So as you can see, penetration is going to be a huge stat for Stamina DPS. Now, moving into Nightblade tanking, if you would like to try to tank as a Nightblade, these are going to be the sets that I would recommend to start out with. You have 5-piece Hist Bark, which will give you a line of physical resistance, a line of health recovery, a line of max health, and then you will gain major evasion while you're blocking, which will increase your dodge chance by 15%. Very, very strong set. You will be running 4-piece Song of Lamae. Now, you're going to be running 4 pieces on both bars because I'm assuming for this build you are running double sword and board. Granted, you know, some people are going to be like, but my ice staff tanking or whatever. I'm just giving a very general guide for this build. Or I'm assuming a general build for this guide, so I'm going to assume you're running double sword and board. So you're going to have 4-piece Song of Lamae, which just gives you a very well-rounded set of stats, a line of spell resistance, a line of physical resistance, and a line of max health. And then you're going to be running 3 pieces of Endurance, which is going to give you a line of max health and a line of stamina recovery. Then when it's time to move on, you have some choices. You're still going to be running the Hist Bark. You're still going to be running 5-piece Hist Bark. You are also going to be running 5 pieces of Plague Doctor, which gives you 2 lines of max health, some more healing taken, and then a huge health bonus, 6k on the 5-piece. And then for your monster sets, I would recommend Bloodspawn. I would recommend trying to go for Bloodspawn. When you take damage, you have a 6% chance to generate ult, and when you increase your physical and spell resistance for 6 seconds. And this effect can occur every 6 seconds. So as you can see, Bloodspawn, an extremely strong set for tanking. But if you go, I don't want that, I would recommend then just combining 2 1-piece monster set bonuses that give you either health or resistance. So in this case, I'd recommend either Valken Scoria and Pirate Skeleton. That would be of 2 very good 1-piece monster sets to combine together. But I would highly, highly, highly recommend trying to go for Bloodspawn. Now for your healer. You have 2 choices for your starter setup. You have 5-piece Julianos, 3 Seducers, 3 Willpower, or 5 Seducers, 3 Julianos, 3 Willpower. It's really up to you whether or not you want that reduced Magicka cost, or you want the extra spell damage from Julianos. And keep in mind, you'll also be losing, you know, if you go with the 5-piece Seducer, you're going to lose a line of spell critical and that line of spell damage. And if you go with the 5 Julianos, you're going to lose the reduced Magicka cost and the Magicka recovery. So you kind of need to decide for yourself, do I want more recovery, or do I want bigger heals? Really personal preference for the starting gear set. And then you're going to be running a 3-piece Willpower. This gives a very, very well-rounded set of stats to your character. Again, a great starting set for healing. Now, prepare yourself, because we have a lot of options for the upgraded set. Boom. So there's a lot going on here, but I'll make it simple. You will be running 5 pieces of Spell Power Cure. It has been the best in slot healer set for a while. It is from farming White Gold Tower. You could just farm normal White Gold Tower and then upgrade the pieces. Spell Power Cure is a must on your healer. It's just a must. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Get it. Now, you're going to have a lot of choices, though, for what you want to pair with your Spell Power Cure set. If you eventually want to run Trials, this actually could be a best-in-slot gear set here. If you eventually want to run Trials, you need to work with the healer in your trial, your other healer, with what set they're going to be running versus what set you're going to be running. But these are your choices that I would recommend. You either have Worm, which will give you spell damage, magic recovery, magicka, and reduces the cost of your magic abilities by 4% for you and the whole group. Sanctuary gives you health, max magicka, healing taken, and increases the healings received for the group. Eyes of Mara, recovery, max magicka, spell damage, and then reduces the magicka cost of restoration staff abilities by 12%. And then you have Healing Mage, which gives you recovery, max magicka, healing done. And then when you use an area of effect heal, you reduce the weapon damage of all enemies within 10 meters of you by 430. So you could really run any one of these 4 sets. It kind of is going to depend on what the other person in your trial is going to run. But I would recommend at least one of you has to run Worm. That's generally a known thing for trials. So make sure at least one of you is running Worm. And then the other person can really use whatever they want from this list here. And then you're going to have 1 piece of gear left. So I would recommend running a monster set, either Helm or Shoulder. And I would recommend either Molak Kina if you can get it, which gives you a 129 weapon and spell damage. Obviously, you want it for the spell damage. Or run any monster helm that gives you max magicka, so I just put Grothar on the screen as a recommendation. The next section we're going to be talking about is the Sorcerer. We're going to start with the Magic Sorcerer. To start with your base setup, you have 5 pieces of Julianos, 3 pieces of Seducer, and 3 pieces of Willpower. So you will gain 2 lines of Spell Critical, Max Magicka, and Spell Damage from your Julianos. You'll be getting Recovery and Max Magicka from Seducer, and then Willpower will give you that big Max Magicka bonus and will give you Spell Damage. This is a very well-rounded set of stats to start out on a Magicka character, and I recommend it for every single Magicka DPS starting out. It's just such a solid gear set to start with. When you are ready to move on, though, to something a little bit greater, you have some options. Now, there's going to be 2 different setups, either pets or no pets. Now, the pet setup is easier to get than the no pet setup. So we're going to start with the pet setup. You have 4-piece Julianos, 5-piece Necropotence, because obviously you're going to be running pets, and you want that 5th item in Necropotence, which is when you have pets active, increase your max magicka by 4k. And you are also going to be running 2 pieces of Elambris, which gives you a line of max magicka, and then when you deal flame or shock damage, you have a 10% chance to summon a meteor shower that will deal damage of that type to all enemies within 4 meters every second for 5 seconds. Now, the reason you're going to want to run Elambris is because the Sorcerer obviously has a lot of lightning spells in its build, and the odds are one of your staffs is going to be a flame staff, so you will be dealing both types of damage, so Elambris will be proccing a lot. Now, if you decide that you want to run no pets, you are a little shit out of luck. The gear set I recommend for you requires you to do a dungeon for Netch's Touch. Netch's Touch is just too good to pass up for the no pet Sorc. You get a line of spell critical, a line of max magicka, a line of spell damage, and then it adds 400 spell damage to your shock abilities. So you're going to need to go grab Netch's Touch for the no pet build. You're still going to run Elambris for the reasons I stated in the pet build, and then same thing with Julianos. You will be running 4 pieces of Julianos, 5 pieces of Netch's Touch, and 2 pieces of Elambris. Now, moving on to the Stam Sorc. We have the same setup as the Stam Nightblade, and this will be the same starting setup for all of the Stam characters. We have Hunding's Rage. You'll be running 5-piece Hunding's Rage, 4-piece Nightmother's Gauge, and 3 pieces of Agility. The reason you're going to be running 4 pieces of Nightmother's Gauge while for the Magica DPS, you are really only running 3 pieces of Seducers, is because this is assuming you're going to be running dual wield on your front bar, which gives you another piece of gear. You're going to get 2 lines of weapon critical, max stamina, and increases your weapon damage from Hunting's Rage. Night Mother's Gaze will give you 2 more lines of weapon critical and weapon damage, and then Agility will give you a big boost of max stamina and weapon damage. When you are ready to move on to the Overland and Monster Set combinations, you have 5-piece Spriggans. Very, very, very important to get. The 4K physical penetration is very important for stamina DPS because of the fact that you guys get no penetration through your passives. So you'll be getting 2 lines of stamina, a line of weapon damage, and a huge penetration bonus. Same thing with Night Mother's Gaze. You will now be getting the 5-piece bonus. You will also have your critical strikes reduce the target's physical resistance for 6 seconds, more pen, and then to even add on more pen, we have 2-piece Crag, which will give you physical penetration, and when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to spawn drug limbs that will create shockwaves in front of you, dealing 1300 physical damage every 0.4 seconds for 1.2 seconds, and this effect can occur every 3 seconds. Now, moving on to a Sorcerer tank, we have the same setup as the Nightblade tanks for the starter gear. We have 5 pieces of Hist bark, which will give you physical resistance, health recovery, and max health, and you will gain major evasion while blocking. Then you have Song of Lamae, which will give you 2 lines of spell resistance, a line of spell resistance, a line of physical resistance, and a line of max health, because this is assuming you run double sword and board, which I would recommend for a starting tank. It's just a very straightforward setup, and in my opinion, it's very good to learn on for a tank. And then you will be running 3 pieces of endurance, which gives you a line of max health and will give you some stamina recovery. Once you are ready to get some monster and overland sets, you are going to be running 5 pieces of Histbark still, but you're going to be running 5 pieces of Plague Doctor, which will give you 2 lines of max health, a line of healing taken, and a huge max health bonus for that 5-piece, 6k max health added. Now, when it comes to your monster sets, optimally, you should be running Bloodspawn. Bloodspawn's really good to pass up. It gives you a line of stamina recovery, and when you take damage, you have a 6% chance to gen ultimate and increase your resistances for 6 seconds, and this can occur every 6 seconds. It is just a very good set, and I would recommend going for it, but if you're like, screw that, I don't want that, then you can just combine any 2 monster set pieces that give you, health and resistances. So what I'd recommend is running 1-piece Falcon Scoria for a line of health, and then 1-piece Pirate Skeleton, because you will get both types of resistances from running that singular piece. Now, moving on to Healer, we have 2 options for the starting sets. You have 5-piece Julianos, 3 Seducers, 3 Willpower, or 5-piece Seducers, 3-piece Julianos, 3-piece Willpower. It's just kind of up to you to decide whether or not you want to have more recovery, because the Seducers will give you that extra line of recovery and reduce the cost of your Magicka abilities by 8%. So, more frequent healing or larger heals through the extra spell critical and spell damage. There really isn't a wrong way to go. It's just kind of up to your personal preference, what food you're using, what Mundustone you're using. It's really your choice. But regardless, you will also be running 3 pieces of Willpower on top of that. But when it's time to move on to the Overland's gear, you have a lot of options. You have Spell Power Cure. Needs to be farmed. I know that this is going to be an Overland mainly only guide, but the difference from the base gear to like any other gear is going to be minimal, so you may as well just farm out the Spell Power Cure. It is a hard set to farm, don't get me wrong, but it is the best healing set you could possibly get. It's too good to pass up. And then you have some other options for your second set. You're going to need to work with, if you're looking for a trial, you're going to need to work with your other healer to decide what you want to run, because one of you needs to run Worm, and then the other one of you can run any one of these 4 sets I have on my screen. But if you don't ever plan on doing trials, then you can choose between any one of these 4. Worm will give you spell damage, max Magicka, magic recovery, reduces the cost of all your Magicka abilities. Sanctuary will give you Magicka, healing taken, max health, and increases your healing received by 12%. That's for the whole group. Eyes of Mara, Magicka recovery, max Magicka spell damage, and reduce the Magicka cost of Resto staff abilities. And then Healing Mage is a line of Magicka recovery, max Magicka, healing done. And when you use an area of effect heal ability, you reduce the weapon damage of all enemies within 10 meters of you by 430. Now you're going to have a piece of gear left over, so I'd recommend running a monster helm or shoulder. So you could run Molekina, which is what I would recommend, which will give you spell damage. But if you don't have Molekina or do not want to get Molekina, then you could also run a set that gives you Max Magicka. So I have Grothdar on here as an example. Next up, we have Templar, starting with Magicka Templar DPS. We have the same setup that I've recommended so far for the Sorc and the Nightblade. We have 5-piece Julianos, 3-piece Seducer, and 3-piece Willpower. Julianos giving you those 2 lines of crit, Max Magicka, and spell damage. Seducer giving you a line of recovery and Max Magicka. And Willpower giving you Max Magicka and spell damage. I recommend this setup to everybody for a starting Magicka class because it is a very well-rounded set of stats. For a starting gear, only crafted with obviously Willpower being purchased from guild traders, it's a very good, well-rounded set, and you'll be hard-pressed to find a combination of solely crafted gear that will give you such a well-rounded set of stats for PvE. But once you're ready to move on to some overland and monster sets, you have some options here. You can continue to run Julianos, or you can switch to Twiceborn Star, which will give you a line of max health, a line of max stamina, and Max Magicka, and will allow you to have 2 Mundastone boons at the same time. At the time of recording this video, pre-Horns of the Reach, the 2 best ones to run are Thief and Shadow. Post-Horns of the Reach, we don't really know yet. I would recommend, if you're watching this post-Horns of the Reach, just Google Twiceborn Star, ESO, Horns of the Reach. Odds are you will find a thread somewhere that discusses the best two Mundastones to use with TBS. You're also, for your monster set, going to be running Grothdar. That'll give you a line of Max Magicka, and when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create lava pools that swirl around you, dealing 2k flame damage to all enemies within 8 meters of you every second for 5 seconds, and it's going to occur every 10 seconds. And then after that, you are going to be running 3 pieces of Willpower and some random staff or a random piece of gear somewhere in your build, or you could run 4 pieces of Mother Sorrow. It's really up to you which combination you want to run. Now we are moving into Templar Stamina DPS. The basic gear set is going to be 5 pieces of Hunting's Rage, 4 pieces of Nightmother's Gaze, and 3 pieces of Agility. The Hunting's Rage set is going to give you 2 lines of weapon critical, a line of max stamina, and a line of weapon damage. Nightmother's Gaze is going to give you 2 lines of weapon critical and a line of weapon damage, and then Agility will give you a huge boost to your stamina and more weapon damage. Now, if you're wondering why you're using 4 pieces of Nightmother's Gaze in this setup, while in the Magicka setup you were only able to use 3 pieces of Seducers, is because of the fact that for Stamina DPS you will be dual wielding most likely, so it gives you another piece of gear on your front bar, so you will be able to achieve the 4 piece from Nightmother's Gaze. Once you are ready to upgrade to some better gear, this is what you're going to be aiming for. 5 pieces of Spriggans. You will now be able to use 5 pieces of Nightmother's Gaze and then 2-piece Crag. Spriggans is going to give you 2 lines of stamina, a line of weapon damage, and a crap ton of pen. The reason you want this physical penetration is because of the fact that stamina characters, you guys do not get any penetration through your passives. You need to get it through your gear. So that is why we have Spriggans here, and then the 5 pieces of Nightmothers giving your crit attacks a chance to, or your critical attacks will reduce the target's physical resistance for 6 seconds, and then Crag gives you physical penetration straight up, and then when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to spawn Drug Limbs that create shockwaves in front of you, which deal physical damage every 0.4 seconds for 1.2 seconds. So an extremely strong setup for your stamina DPS. Moving into tanks, we have 5-piece Hist Bark, 4-piece Song of Lamae, and 3 pieces of Endurance. Now, I'm assuming for this build, you are running double sword and board. In my opinion, it is what is best for a tank starting out. Don't try, using the Ice Staff tanking. It's just much easier to just start off with double sword and board. Song of Lamae gives you a very well-rounded set of stats. You get physical resistance, spell resistance, and health. Hist Bark gives you health recovery, physical resistance, and then you gain major evasion while you're blocking, which will increase your dodge chance by 15%. And Endurance will give you a line of max health and a line of stamina recovery. So a very well-rounded set of stats from your starting gear. But when it's time to upgrade, you're going to still keep your Hist Bark, but you're going to be adding Plague Doctor in. A 5-piece Plague Doctor. So that will give you 2 lines of health, a line of healing taken, and then a huge bonus to your health, 6k max health added to your stats. Now, in terms of your monster set, you really would like to optimally run Bloodspawn. Gives you a line of stamina recovery, and then when you take damage, you have a 6% chance to generate 15 ultimate and increase your physical and spell resistance for 6 seconds, and this can occur once every 6 seconds. Very, very, very strong set. Now, if you don't want to run Bloodspawn, or you don't have Bloodspawn, and you want to run some other monster sets, I would recommend running 2 one-piece monster sets that give you some sort of health or resistances. So on the screen here, I have Valken Scoria, gives you a line of health, and then Pirate Skeleton gives you, for that first line, you get both types of resistances, so you could also run 1 piece of each of those if you don't want to run the Bloodspawn. Now, for your healer starting setup, you have 2 choices. You can either run 5 Julianas, 3 Seducers, 3 Willpower, or 5 Seducers, 3 Julianos, 3 Willpower. It's up to you to decide whether or not you want the extra line of recovery and the reduced magic cost of your abilities, or do you want the extra spell critical and spell damage. There really isn't a wrong answer here. It's kind of just up to your personal preference, you know, your food buff, your Munda Stone, stuff like that, with what you want to use. But regardless, you will still be running 3 pieces of Willpower on the side. Now, when it comes to the better gear, unfortunately, you are stuck going to dungeons to farm this gear. There really isn't much of an upgrade otherwise, because the set Spell Power Cure is just too strong to not get. You get 2 lines of Max Magicka, a line of spell damage, and when you heal a friendly target that is at full health, you have a 50% chance to increase their weapon spell damage. It's just such a good set, and you really, really need to be running it. You have a secondary set that you can use alongside of it. If you're planning on healing trials, work with your other healer in your group to decide what sets you guys should be running. You do not want to run the same sets. One of you should optimally be running the Worm's Raiment, but the other one could run whatever they want. Now, if you are not running trials, then you could choose any one of these 4. So, Worm's Raiment gives you spell damage, max magicka, magicka recovery, and reduces the cost of your magicka abilities by 4% for you and your group. Sanctuary gives you health, healing taken, max magicka, and increases your healing received by 12% for you and your group within 10 meters. And then Healing Mage gives you a line of magicka recovery, a line of max magicka, healing done, and when you use an area of effect heal ability, you reduce the weapon damage of all enemies within 10 meters of you by 430 for 3 seconds. Now, you're going to have a dead piece of gear somewhere in here. Probably you want it to be your shoulder or your head, so that you could fill it with a monster piece and get some more bonuses. I would recommend Molakina if you can get it. Adds 129 spell damage, but if you either don't want to run it or don't have it, and would rather have Max Magicka instead, you can also do that, and so I have Grothar as an example, but any piece that gives you Max Magicka would suffice for this final slot. Moving on to our 4th class, we have the Dragon Knight, and we are going to be starting with a Magicka DPS Dragon Knight. So your starting gear set is going to be 5 pieces of Julianos, 3 pieces of Seducer, and 3 pieces of Willpower, same as all the other classes. The reason I like this setup is it gives you an extremely well-rounded set of stats for being all crafted gear, with obviously Willpower being purchased from the guild traders. It's a very, very, very well-rounded set of gear. You're going to be running, like I said, 5-piece Juliana, so that'll give you the 2 lines of spell critical, a line of max magicka, and a line of spell damage. You have 3 pieces of Seducer, so you're just going to be getting the magicka recovery and the max magicka, and then 3 pieces of Willpower, which will give you max magicka and spell damage, a very well-rounded set of stats. When you are ready to upgrade, this is what you have to work with. You're going to be running 5 pieces of Silks of the Sun. Silks of the Sun gives you max health, max magicka, spell damage, and gives you 400 additional spell damage on your flame damage abilities, which is obviously, you know, all of them. So you're going to be wanting to be running Silks of the Sun. You're going to have 4 pieces of Juliana, so you're going to lose that last piece of last line of spell damage, and then you have a choice here whether or not you want to run Grothar or Valken Scoria. Valken Scoria is a little bit harder to get than Grothar, but you can run it if you would like. Valken Scoria is going to give you a line of health, and then when you deal damage with a dot, you have an 8% chance to summon a meteor that deals 9k flame damage to the target and 4k to all other enemies within 5 meters. This could occur once every 5 seconds. And then Grothar will give you a line of magicka, and when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create lava pools that will swirl around you, dealing 2k flame damage to all enemies within 8 meters of you every second for 5 seconds. This can occur once every 10 seconds. Now, guys, the cool thing about this setup right here is this is almost best in slot gear. The only other substitution would be running Moon Dancer instead of Julianos, but Moon Dancer is a trial set. So obviously for the purposes of this guide, we're not going to be looking at getting gear from trials. But this gear set, not that hard to get, and almost best in slot. So that's pretty freaking cool. Now, moving on to stamina DPS. Same setup as everyone else. We have 5 pieces of Hunting's Rage, 4 pieces of Night Mother's Gaze, and 3 pieces of Agility. Now, before you ask, Dottz Gaming, why 4 pieces of Night Mother's Gaze when I can only run 3 pieces of Seducers? That is because when you're playing a stamina DPS, you will be dual wielding at least on your front bar, so you should have an extra piece of gear to work with, which will allow you to get that 4th line from Night Mother's Gaze. Hunting's Rage, you're going to be getting 2 lines of weapon critical, a line of max stamina, and a line of weapon damage. Night Mother's Gaze will give you 2 lines of weapon critical, weapon damage, and the 5 piece doesn't count yet. Just kidding, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. And then Agility is going to give you max stamina and weapon damage, a very well-rounded set of stats. When it's upgrade time, you're now going to be running 5-piece Spriggans, 5-piece Night Mother's Gaze, and 2-piece Crag. Spriggans gives you 2 lines of max dam, weapon damage, and physical penetration, and a shit ton of it. And the reason this is so important is because stamina DPS do not get any penetration from their passive, so you must get it off of your gear. So Spriggans is an extremely crucial set in accomplishing that goal. You will also have 5 pieces of Night Mother's Gaze, so you will now get that 5th line, which gives your critical attacks, which will make your critical attacks reduce the target's physical resistance. And then just to add more penetration into the mix, you have Crag, which gives you more pen, and then when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to spawn drug limbs that will create shockwaves in front of you, which deal physical damage every 0.4 seconds for 1.2 seconds. When it's time to move on to your tank, this is the starter tank setup. You have 5 pieces of Hist Bark, 4 pieces of Song of Lamae, and 3 pieces of Endurance. The 5 pieces of Hist Bark will give you physical resistance, health recovery, max health, and it will give you major evasion while you're blocking, which will give you 15% dodge chance. You're also going to be running 4 pieces of Song of Lamae on both bars. I'm assuming you're running double sword and board, which you probably should as a starting tank. I would recommend it. Very well-rounded set of stats. Spell resistance, physical resistance, max health. You can't ask for a more well-rounded kit of stats. And then you have Endurance, which will give you a line of max health and a line of stamina recovery. Now when it's time to upgrade your gear, you're going to keep the 5 pieces of Hist Bark, but we're going to ditch the Song of Lamae and upgrade that to 5 pieces of Plague Doctor, which will give you 2 lines of max health, a line of healing taken, and give you a huge boost to your max health, giving you a 6k bonus with that 5-piece set. And then for your monster set, I would absolutely at all costs try to get Bloodspawn. Not absolutely at all costs. I would recommend it, trying to get Bloodspawn, giving you a line of stamina recovery. And when you take damage, you have a 6% chance to generate 15 ult and increase your physical and spell resistance for 6 seconds. If you don't want to run Bloodspawn or don't feel that you can get Bloodspawn, you can run 2 1-piece bonuses that give you both defensive stuff. So Valken Scoria will give you a line of health, and then Pirate Skeleton will give you, the first line will give you both physical and spell resistance. So that's a good combination of 1-piece set bonuses if you do not want to run Bloodspawn. Now moving into the Dragon Knight Healer, we have 2 possible setups. We have the 5-piece Julianos, 3-piece Seducer, and 3-piece Willpower, just like Magic and DPS. Or we can flip it around and run 5 pieces of Seducer, 3 pieces of Julianos, and 3 pieces of Willpower. It's really up to you whether or not you want that line of Magicka recovery and the reduced Magicka cost, or do you want the spell crit and spell damage. There isn't a wrong choice. It's up to what food you're using, what Mundus Stone, what race. There's a lot of other factors that play into it, so it's really up to you to make that decision for what you want to play. But when it's time to move on to the better gear, you have to run some dungeons for this because Spell Power Cure is too strong to not run. Spell Power Cure gives you 2 lines of max Magicka, a line of spell damage, and then the reason the set is so good, when you heal a friendly target that is at 100% health, you have a 50% chance to increase your weapon and spell damage by 258 for 10 seconds. It is the best in slot set, and it comes from White Gold Tower, so you could easily just do normal White Gold Tower with a group and just farm this over and over again if you would like to get it. Alongside of this, you could either run Worm, Sanctuary, Eyes of Mara, or Healing Mage. Really up to you. If you plan on running Trials, you should coordinate with the other healer in your group. For one of you should be running Worm, and then the other one of you can either run Eyes of Mara, Healing Mage, or Sanctuary. Worm's going to give you spell damage, max Magicka, magic recovery, and reduces the cost of the Magicka abilities by 4% for the entire group. Sanctuary is going to give you health, healing taken, max Magicka, and then increases the healing received for the group. Highs of Mara is going to give you Magicka Recovery, max Magicka spell damage, and then reduce the Magicka cost of your Resto Staff skills by 12%. And then Healing Mage is going to give you a line of Magicka Recovery, max Magicka, healing done, and when you use an Area of Effect heal ability, you will reduce the weapon damage of all enemies within 10 meters by 430 for 3 seconds. Now, you're going to have an empty gear slot here, so you want to fill it with a singular piece of a monster set. So I would recommend Molekina. Will give you 129 spell damage. But if you don't want to run Molekina or do not have it and have a piece like Grothar lying around that gives you max Magicka, you could run that instead and be just fine. Moving on to our last class, we have the Warden. Now, for Magicka DPS, it is the same as everyone else. 5-piece Julianos, 3-piece Seducers, and 3 pieces of Willpower. Julianos giving you 2 lines of Spell Critical, max Magicka and spell damage. Seducers giving you a line of Magicka Recovery, max Magicka. Another... you won't be getting that other line of Magicka Recovery. Just excuse me, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. And then Willpower will give you a line of max Magicka and line of spell damage. So, you have a very, very well-rounded set of stats here. You're very hard-pressed for a set of 2 sets of crafted gear and gear jewelry bought from a guild trader. You're going to be hard-pressed to find a more well-rounded set of stats. Julianos is just such a good set for PvE, and Seducers gives you that line of recovery and the max Magicka because you are only running 3 pieces of it. It's just a very good starter set for Magicka DPS. Now, when it's time to upgrade your gear and you're ready for the next set, you're still going to be running Julianos, except for you're only going to be running 4 pieces of it, because the 5 pieces is now going to be taken over by Necropotence, which will give you 3 lines of max Magicka, and while you have a pet active, you're going to want to run a pet, you will get a huge boost to your max Magicka, 4k to your max Magicka. So an absolutely great set to run alongside of Julianos. And then I would also recommend running Grothar as your monster set. So you'll get more Magicka, and then when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create lava pools that swirl around you, dealing flame damage to all enemies within 8 meters of you every 1 second for 5 seconds, and this can occur every 10 seconds. So this will give you a crap ton of Magicka, which will really, really raise the tooltip of all of your abilities. Moving into Stamina DPS, we have the same setup as everyone else for the starting gear. Hunding's Rage, Night Mother's Gaze, and Agility. 5 pieces for Hunding's, 4 for Night Mother's Gaze, and 3 for Agility. You might be asking me, Dottz Gaming, why 4 pieces of Night Mothers when I can only run 3 pieces of Seducers? And that is because for the Stamina DPS for PvE, you're going to be wanting to dual wield on your front bar, which will give you an extra line on that front bar. Now, for Hunting's Rage, you'll be getting 2 lines of Weapon Critical, a line of max Stamina, and Weapon Damage. You'll be getting 2 lines of Weapon Critical for Night Mother's Gaze, and a line of Weapon Damage, and then from Agility, you're going to be getting a huge boost to your Stam, and more weapon damage. Now, when it comes time to upgrade, you're going to be keeping the Night Mother's Gaze, except for you're going to be able to add another piece, so you will get that 5-piece bonus, and you're going to want to run Spriggans. Spriggans gives you 2 lines of max Stam, a line of weapon damage, and a crap ton of penetration. The reason Spriggans is very important is because of the fact that medium armored characters do not get any penetration, any physical penetration from their passives. The medium armor skill line offers none, so you have to get it from your gear, which makes Spriggans a very, very important set. Night Mother's Gaze just even adds on to that with your 5-piece now, with your critical attacks reducing the target's physical resistance for 6 seconds, and then when you just add Crag, which will be more pen, and giving you the monster set proc, which is when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to spawn drug limbs that will create shockwaves in front of you, dealing physical damage every 0.4 seconds for 1.2 seconds. So a lot of penetration in this setup, so you will deal a crap ton of damage. Moving into the tanks, we are going to be running 5 pieces of Hist Bark, 4 pieces of Song Lamae, and 3 pieces of Endurance. Hist Bark's going to give you physical resistance, health recovery, max health, and major evasion, increasing your dodge chance by 15%. The major evasions while blocking, which will increase your dodge chance by 15%. You'll get four lines from Song of Lamae on both bars, because I'm assuming you're running double sword and board. Very important in my mind for a new tank to run double sword and board. I think, Ice Staff tanking has its place, and other types of secondary weapons have their place, but I think running double sword and board is probably best. You get a very well-rounded set of stats. Spell resistance, physical resistance, max health. Very well-rounded. And then Endurance, which will give you a big line of max health, and Stamina recovery. Now, when it comes time to upgrade, you're going to want to keep that Hist Bark, but we're going to be replacing Song of Lamae and adding another piece with Plague Doctor. 2 lines of max health, a line of healing taken, and then a huge boost to your max health, 6,000 added to your max health. Now for your monster set, if you can, run Blood Spawn. That gives you a line of stamina recovery, and then when you take damage, you have a 6% chance to generate 15 ult, increasing your physical and spell resistance for 6 seconds. If you don't have Blood Spawn, or if you don't want to run it, then I would recommend running 2 one-piece bonuses that have like that are defensively oriented. So for example, Valkyd Scoria gives you a line of health, and Pirate Skeleton gives you both types of resistances for just having one piece. So that is another alternate. You can run one of those instead of running Blood Spawn. Now moving into your healer, you have 2 options. You have 5-piece Julianos, 3 Seducers, 3 Willpower, same as the DPS, or you can swap it and run 5 Seducers, 3 Julianos, and 3 Willpower. It's really up to you to decide whether or not you want that extra line of Magicka recovery and the reduced cost versus the spell critical and spell damage. There really isn't a wrong answer. It kind of depends on your situation, you know, what your Mundus Stone is, what your food buff is, what your race is, so it's really up to you to make the decision of what you want to run, but neither choice is incorrect. Now, when it's time to upgrade, we need to run some dungeons for this. It's gotta happen. Spell Power Cure is too good to not get. So you're going to be having 2 lines of max Magicka for that, in line of spell damage, and then when you heal a friendly target that is at max health, you have a 50% chance to increase their weapon and spell damage by 258. Just so good. It's too good to not run. Now, your secondary set, you have a lot of options, either Worm, Sanctuary, Eyes of Mara, or Healing Mage. Now, if you plan on running Trials, I would work with your other healer to decide which one of you is going to run Worm, because one of you should, and pretty much has to, and then the other person could choose between the other 3. But if you're not running Trials, then you could really choose whichever one of these sets you want. Worm gives you spell damage, max Magicka, Magicka recovery, and reduces the cost of your Magicka abilities by 4% for you in the group. And then Sanctuary gives you max health, healing taken, max Magicka, increases the group's healing done. Healing received, excuse me. Eyes of Mara gives you max Magicka, Magicka recovery, spell damage, and reduces the Magicka cost of your Resto Staff abilities by 12%, and then Healing Mage gives you Magicka recovery, max Magicka, healing done, and when you use an area of effect heal ability, you reduce the weapon damage of all enemies within 10 meters by 430 for 3 seconds. Now, you're going to have an extra piece of gear left on your build, so I would recommend running a monster head or shoulder. So I would go Molekina, which will give you 129 spell damage, but if you don't want to run Molekina or don't have Molekina and just have a monster helm somewhere that gives you max Magicka, that is good too, with like, you know, Infernal Guardian, Grothdar, anything like that, a line of max Magicka will work out just fine. Now that is it for me, guys. I know this guide was really long, but I wanted to cover every class, every role, so that no matter what you're playing, you can come to this guide and go, which gear should I be running? Which gear should I aim for? And that's not overly difficult to get, and that will still perform at a relatively high level. Oh, guys, if you watch the whole guide, if you sat through all, 40 plus minutes of this, I don't know how long it is once it's edited down, you're going to notice there's a common thread between a lot of the classes. The starting Magicka DPS setup I recommend is the same. Same thing with the starting, all the starting sets I recommend are the same. All the starting crafted sets I recommended were the same. Stamina DPS was relatively consistent throughout all of the classes. Same thing with tanks and same thing with healers. The main difference was in the Magicka DPS users. Each class's Magicka DPS really has a very different feel to it, so they required their own sets. So honestly, guys, if you go through this guide and acquire the gear sets that I talk about here, you will pretty much, say for Stam DPS, right? 5-piece Spriggans, 5-piece Nightmother's Gaze, and 2-piece Crag. You now have stamina DPS gear for all of your characters if you want to have as Templar stam DPS. So what I tried to do and what Justin and I tried to do was find good gear that was usable, that was just usable on a general basis, and that will still perform at a really high level. Like I said, Magicka DPS was just the main area where there was variance because each class's Magicka DPS are so different, so they require different sets. But I really hope this helped you out. Look, this is Justin and I's personal opinion and what we came up with for each. I know that everyone has their own personal opinion on what they like to run, but this is what we came up with, and we really think that you guys will enjoy using these gear sets and will perform well with all of this gear. If you have any questions, I know I went over a lot of information here, please leave a comment below and I will happily do my best to help you out. If you appreciate the effort that went into this guide from both myself and Justin, I would appreciate if you left a like on it. And of course, for more content like this, for more guides on the Elder Scrolls Online, and for some awesome streams, please hit that sub button and hit the little bell so you are always notified on what we are doing. I stream every Monday and every Wednesday here on YouTube from 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So come join the fun, come chill and relax. We have a great group of people over at the stream, and I really want you to come and check it out. You, the viewer, come stop by, check it out, have fun. No, but the stream's always a good time, and I would recommend that you guys come and check it out at least once and see what we're all about. Thank you so much for watching this guide, guys. I really hope it helped you out. This was a really long guide, much longer than I expected, but there's a lot of information in it, and my throat is really sore, so I'm gonna go take a break. So thanks for watching this, guys. Appreciate the view as always. I'm Dottz Gaming. Have a wonderful day.